Dr. Katie Walter from the University of Alaska sent this image of a shallow lake in Alaska where methane is bubbling up, and as some of you know, there is an effort underway to try to understand what appears to be an increase in methane emissions already in the Arctic. Dr. Walter and her team went out to another shallow lake last winter.
Oh my God. There's Spirit. Spirit? No. On this side, yeah.
She's okay. You will recognize that as field research. But the other effect I want to talk about, you'll notice that big white chunk of ice to the south of the area where the heat is building up. And Greenland has been undergoing an accelerated melting. This is one of the seasonal rivers that, well, this is a moulin, a famous image from the University of Manchester. You can see the scientists at the top. But here is a seasonal river that has accelerated in its melting. And if you want to know what melting ice looks like as it goes into the sea, raising sea level, this is what it looks like. That's why we've already had these lateral surges, why that house in Alaska and this one in Canada fell into the sea. The Maldives recently added a new budget line in their budget last year, marked "to buy a new country." Another of the low-lying Pacific nations also just began that debate this year. For every 1 meter of sea level rise, 100 million climate refugees are put on the move. If Greenland ever did melt, or West Antarctica, the consequences would be 450 million climate refugees. And speaking of Antarctica, the recent studies just last month confirmed that the entire continent is in a negative ice balance, but West Antarctica is the one that is heating up the most. It's almost exactly the same size as Greenland, and the recent studies show that the temperature increases there are far greater. This actually underrepresents what's happening on the peninsula, where it's greater still. That's where those ice shelves have been falling off. My wife Tipper took this picture on our vacation in British Columbia last year. You can see what our vacations are like. This glacier in Peru provides the drinking water for this city. And the flows are increasing, but as the ice goes away, much of the water will as well. In California this month, the ice pack is 40% below normal and the reservoirs are very low, and the forecast is for the worst drought ever. Most significantly, there's 100 times as much ice and snow in the Himalayas as all the rivers in Europe, and of course the Indus and the Ganges and the Brahmaputra and the Salween or Irrawaddy, the Mekong, the Yangtze, and the Yellow all originate in that ice field, and 40% of the world's people get almost half of their drinking water from it. Those lakes, this is a satellite photo of one of the ridges in the Himalayas, and those lakes at the top of the image were glaciers just a short time ago. I'm not going to dwell on the hurricanes and the view of many scientists that the intensity of hurricanes is affected by the warming oceans, but not much was made of the fact that 1 million people were evacuated from New Orleans again this year. Is that the new normal? Cedar Rapids, Iowa had a 500-year flood last summer. All 9 rivers in Iowa flooded simultaneously. This river crested above the previous record by 11 feet higher than ever in history. That's not a small increment. A 500-year floodplain. Cedar Rapids is still devastated by this flood. It has not recovered. And this area of the world is used to flooding, but new records are being set. 13 countries in Central Africa flooded a little over a year ago, in Mexico, in Brazil. And of course, as you know, the same heat that puts more moisture into the atmosphere and causes larger downpours sucks it out of the soil, and the drought conditions that are deeper and more difficult in many countries around the world are increasing. Australia is still gripped by a 4-year drought. This is the Murray-Darling River Basin, which is normally from one shore to the other. 40% of Australia's agriculture comes from that river basin. And of course, in Georgia, Tennessee and Georgia had an altercation over Georgia's improper effort to redraw the state line to get a reservoir. The drying soils and the fewer number of days with frost have contributed to an extraordinary die-off of trees in the West, and the increase in fires is quite significant. The largest fires in the history of Georgia and Florida, respectively. Several times in the last 3 years, hundreds of thousands of people have had to be evacuated from their homes in California. The government of Greece almost fell a year and a half ago because of the record fires there. And then this month, the highest temperatures ever measured in Australia. And of course, the fires in southeastern Australia, still going on as we meet here, have caused the tragic loss of almost 300 lives and have ignited a new nationwide debate in Australia that is very much focused on global warming. And this iconic picture has gone around the world. These little koalas usually avoid people at all costs. Maybe you've seen some of the interviews with that fireman. I have. All around the world, the fires from January to September of this past year, now the pixels are rather dominated by these fires, so they seem much larger than they are, but they're large enough. This is creating weather-related disasters that are completely unprecedented. On the left-hand side of this image, you will see what used to be the norm. And in recent years, the increase has been quite startling, 4 times as many in the last 30 years as in the previous 75, and the increases are continuing. This has a huge economic impact, and when you look at it in the context of the history of these fires, this from the Center of Research on the Epidemiology of Disasters, it's quite startling. In the last 5 years, we've seen a continuation of the buildup of CO2 in the troposphere. By the most commonly used measure, we're now at 386.7, compared, of course, to 280 in the pre-industrial era. And this image is a rather new one that shows the extreme depletion of oxygen in a vast area of the eastern Pacific and on either side of the Indian subcontinent. Jane Lubchenco, whose hearing took place yesterday for confirmation as the new head of NOAA, talked to me at some length about this image. And this is more significant than just the increase in dead zones. This is a huge area of the ocean. Now, the causes, of course, as you know, about 20% each year comes from deforestation. That's, as you know, perhaps know, the border between Haiti on the left and the Dominican Republic on the right. One set of policies on the left, another set of policies on the right. Policy actually does matter, no matter the level of poverty. And when the land is cleared, the cattle and livestock follow, and diet and the food we eat is very much connected to this crisis.